you everybody for joining us. My name's Dominic Piper. I'm editor of Australia's Paydirt and Gold Mining Journal and our session chair. And look, we've got our panellists eager to join the stage, so I'll just come and ask you now, gents, to come and join us. If you can sit sort of in the order that your heads are on, so Raleigh, if you sit there, then Kyle next to you, Andy at the end, and Allan in between Kyle and Andy. And then we have Chris as well. I'm going to take a seat as well. As Bill mentioned, it's an interactive session. You can tweet questions if you like, but most of the people in this industry, Twitter is only for the small-time investors. But please, we'll have some roving microphones later, so raise your hands and ask us some questions of these esteemed panelists. I'm going to take a seat now. I'll introduce you to our panelists. Next to me is Raleigh Finlayson, Managing Director of Genesis Minerals, who obviously have the Ulysses project in the Leonora region. Next to Raleigh is Kyle from Gold Road, who obviously have the fantastic Gruyere mine and the entire Yamana belt stitched up. Next to Kyle is Allan of Miramar Resources, Executive Chairman of Miramar Resources. I've got ground everywhere, basically, haven't you, in WA? You've got a little bit around the place, in Eastern Goldfields mainly. Next to Allan is Andy Beckwith, of Technical Executive Director of De Grey Mining, who I'm sure everybody knows, and the fantastic Hemi discovery part of their Malina project in the Pilbara. And then joining us remotely, on site as we speak, is Chris Cairns, Executive Chairman of Stavely Minerals, who, of course, are doing fantastic things in Thursday's Gossan and Cayley Lode discovery in Victoria. Chris, thanks for joining us.
Absolute pleasure, Dom. Good
Chris,
to see you guys got a beer in hand.
Yes, everybody's got a beer in hand, and I think that's crucially important. I might start with you, Chris. I don't know if you've seen the video that Fraser kindly just showed us, but you know, this is a time of record gold exploration. That's why Fraser can afford to produce a video like that and give us hundreds of thousands of dollars to sponsor this lunch today, because the assay labs are chock-a-block with gold assays waiting to be processed. Every rig is booked out from here till next year. Every explorer has raised money and is drilling furiously, trying to make new discoveries, add ounces to their portfolios and bring projects into fruition. Chris, I'll start with you. Given all of this exploration expenditure and these record levels of investment, is the gold exploration industry delivering the bang for its buck to investors, do you think?
Bang for its buck to investors. Well, look, I think at the time that we started in Integra, where the US dollar gold price was about $500 an ounce. And I think the discoveries that were made in that time probably worth a lot more now than we appreciated at that time. And maybe we wouldn't have sold Integra to Silver Lake if we knew where the gold price was going to go. But having said that, you know, this whole thing about the discovery rate reminds me of the gold conference in 2010. And I was the second speaker, but the Minister for Mines, Norman Moore, was the first speaker, and he was saying, look, WA is the place to explore because we produce 70% of Australia's gold production, and just look at the latest, greatest discovery, which is Tropicana. And I'm sort of thinking to myself, well, hang on, this is 2010, and Tropicana was discovered in 2005. It was a 5 million ounce discovery, but the interim, up to 2010, the WA gold industry has produced 30 million ounces. So the math doesn't really work for me. And so now to the current day, we're looking at some fabulous, absolutely fabulous discoveries. And since Tropicana, we've had Gruyere, 6.7 million ounces, Havarian 6.5, Hemi 6.8. We've got Winu, Bellevue at 3 million ounces. But my math says that that's about 28 million ounces. But in that sort of 17-year period of time, we've produced in excess of 100 million ounces in WA. So realistically, let's say those deposits grow to double their size from the initial resource. We're still looking at having discovered only half of what we've produced in the past 17 years. So, you know, and really the whole industry is underpinned by the large, long life deposits. So it's the little million ounces, you know, with all due respect, they don't move the needle. And exactly the same with other metals, you know, copper, you've got to think about, you know, Olympic Dam, Broken Hill, yeah, Mount Isa, Cadia Valley, etc. So I think we just have to be careful that we're not too overconfident, or there's not too much hubris in the industry, because I've read that the Lowy Institute want to introduce a resource rent tax. You know, we've got an emerging federal Labor government, in my view. They, you know, are very, very superficial in their thinking, and they're not going to scratch the surface and understand any of the underlying issues that the industry is dealing with. They'll get together with Treasury, and that hubris, I think, invites them to put a tax on us. The other issue I think that we have to face is that if we're not replacing our reserves, one of the key issues for us is just all those blockages that are in place. And it's fundamentally, to me, it boils down to, it's not an investment problem. As you say, explorers are getting plenty of funding. It's land access that is the big problem. And just as an example, one of the recent, you know, the Fosterville tender that the Victorian government put out, one of the key criteria to get on the ground there is that you had to have Aboriginal heritage monitors with you every time you were in the field. The problem, and I'm not commenting on that, the problem is that if they don't respond to you, you can't set foot on ground. And so you're a victim or captive to whether they want to respond to you or not whether, you know, after 3 times, if they haven't responded, you can get on with the job as you can in Queensland. In this instance, you can't move unless they want to move. Anyways, that's you know, don't want to rain on anybody's parade, but that's pretty much the way I view the situation. Great discoveries, but not enough of them.
Thanks, Chris. Raleigh, you've rejoined the junior exploration sector through your investment in and association with Genesis. I've seen your latest presentation. You have ambitions to be a 300,000 ounce producer. How do you do that, given that current rate of discovery? Are we discovering enough?
Yeah, I sort of tend to agree and maybe slightly disagree with Chris. I think gold prices obviously played a big factor from when Chris is talking about the Integra days and the early Saracen days, where gold price is sub 1,000 to where it is at the moment. It's obviously played a big factor in the growth in resource and reserves, fundamentally off known deposits. I suppose the counter argument would be, and not to be too harsh on the exploration geologists in the room, is that it's obviously becoming harder to find gold, particularly at surface. So I think we're going to talk about technology later on, but I think that becomes a critical part. So I think, you know, the Hemi discovery, and if we think about what Chalice has been able to do, I think, you know, credit to companies and to geologists in particular that are prepared to not listen to the pub talk, if you like, and actually go into areas and jurisdictions where others would tell you that you're mad going to. So for me, I think on balance, I think the sector's done a pretty good job, but also recognising the fact that, you know, obviously gold price has gone up and played a part. For me, coming back into the exploration space, personally, I think it's around people. And I think when you go from a company like Saracen at $30 million to $16 billion under the Saracen Northern Star merger, you know, we've got 6,000 people, I don't know any of their names, to come back into Genesis, we've got sort of 20 people. Table over here, that's half our workforce, so pretty low productive day. But you know, again, you know everyone, and for me, you know, the theme around the industry at the moment is access to people and having a core group of people that you can set at the start that sets a foundation for your business is the very reason why I came back down the space. And also my predecessor and Michael Fowler, who I think is one of the best exploration managers going around over decades, did a fantastic job building a team, and we're getting that team to do exactly what they've done over the last 5 years, growing resources in an area that, you know, still now we're finding gold, not just us, but across that, you know, famous Leonora belt.
Thanks, Riley. Andy, everybody so far has mentioned the Hemi discovery, so you know you can keep patting yourself on the back about that for a few more minutes. Is exploration? You've gone to an area that's not exactly renowned for gold discovery success, even though you had existing resources there. But is gold discovery exploration, gold exploration, just more expensive now? As Riley says, you're going deeper under the surface looking for targets or testing targets. Is it more expensive? Is it necessarily going to require a bigger budget?
Does this work? Yeah, so is it expensive, more expensive? On a metre basis, definitely it's increasing. And that's a function of every boom and bust cycle. But we're lucky with Hemi in the fact that the number of ounces we discovered per drill metre is quite exceptional. So for us, we've been quite lucky in being able to do a low discovery rate cost. But I think in general, across the whole industry, it is becoming more expensive. And Chris mentioned land access. That's starting to cost us money, but also time. Time is quite important. Chris was quite right. It is a bit of a hindrance. It's highly required, but it's not necessarily they won't talk to us or won't reply. The issue is for us, have they got the capacity to keep up? Hemi is a big discovery. We're trying to go rapidly. And do they just simply have enough people to do the job? And we've put a rod in our own back by finding Hemi and everybody around us wanting to have clearances and things like that. So they're being pulled from pillar to post as well. So I think time needs to come into the cost of exploration. Probably leave it there, but I think time's probably the fundamental thing that we can't raise money. We can raise money, but we can't raise time.
Allan, you're a slightly different part of the life cycle of the company in having only just listed recently and still on the search for that company making discovery. Are you finding it a more expensive proposition than a more difficult proposition than you did during your Dore days?
Oh yeah, you know, going back 10 years ago, 2010, 2011, I was just talking about it with Kyle before. You know, we had a real gold boom back in 2010, 11. And at the same time, you had all the iron ore guys going crazy as well, you know, Atlas and BC Iron and Fortescue. And people were just stealing geologists from everywhere, you know, to do the work on the iron ore projects. And, you know, just following on from what Andy was saying, I think it's more expensive, but the thing that's become, you know, really difficult is the sheer number of companies that are out there now. I think last year there was 120 companies listed on the ASX, and everyone's fighting for a drill rig, and everyone's fighting to get their samples through the lab and get assays back. And that's that time thing. So if you're a small company and you've maybe got a key project that you're working on, you do a drilling program if you can get a rig, and then you're going to wait and wait and wait for the assays to come back before you can plan your next program, and then you've got to go find a rig again. So that delay in actually turning over results, especially at the size scale that we're at, you know, Hemi's got a bit more clout with the drilling companies, you know, but when you're trying to just keep a program going to get news flow out to be able to raise money, that's the issue. It's that it's like a funnel, and you're just trying to push all this stuff through the funnel, and there's not enough room to get all those companies out there on the ground.
Kyle, do you think we were talking about serendipity earlier in the discovery process and exploration? Do you think Gruyère's discovery was timed right given the market conditions at the time? You know, the sector wasn't booming as it is now.
Yeah, time was a big factor into the discovery of Gruyère. I think the market came off. Gold juniors were at a loss. There was no opportunity to raise money, but what we did have coming into us like 6 months beforehand was a 50 metre space aeromag data set over the belt and our first ever multidisciplinary mineral systems approach targeting database. And Ian Murray had the courage, a chairman at the time, to tell us to stop when we should have been probably twinning some of our best hits and getting those great numbers out to the market to show that we were alive and during that crash in the gold sector. But that time gave us to review these targets, build up our early mechanisms to rank some of them, and then to start going forward and systematically testing those targets compared to during that kind of big gold boom in 2011, 2012, where we were just drilling everything we could, frantically, quite reactive exploration. So stopping and having the time to review our new target data set, take stock of what we had been doing, and then go forward with a simple, conventional exploration methods to test new targets. So yeah, time was a big factor of that.
Really interests me, Kyle mentions Ian Murray, who of course isn't a geologist, but he, as a classic accountant, he told the geos to stop spending money for a while and concentrate on what they were doing. You're not a geologist. How's the approach that you take with an exploration team in a junior situation like that?
I was hoping to convince everyone I was a geologist by the end of today, so thanks for blowing my cover. I'm actually a mine surveyor. I thought I was at the mine surveying conference, so shout out to the mine surveyors out there. Yep, none. Yeah.
Couldn't find a way in.
It's like Eagles supporters going to a Dockers game. But, apparently that's a thing nowadays. I think in lots of ways, we talked about the machinations Kyle mentioned between doing good geology and the market overlay, and Allan mentioned the same thing. So I think the balance is always around wherever you can do good geology, and the very essence of the fact I'm not a geologist. I mean, I always loved that mine geologists didn't particularly like surveyors or engineers telling them to come and tell them where to drill holes, and I found exploration geologists are less inclined to accept my advice. So I suppose at the end of the day, the benefit of a company like Genesis, they had a very good team full of exploration geos. So from day dot, the message was keep doing what you're doing, because they've done a fantastic job growing the resource base from 300,000 ounces to just recently, going over 2 million ounces at a discovery and acquisition cost around $25 an ounce. So for me, that became a very easy model. I talked about people earlier. The biggest goal is actually keeping the team together and making sure that everyone's incentivised for the right result. So I suppose a benefit, and I sort of encourage all exploration companies to find this balance. Having come from a large gold producer, large gold producers, a general observation, aren't very good at just making discoveries. It's not because they don't have the people. It's mainly because they're trying to balance those spinny things, those drill rigs that you guys use. Their balance between trying to do grade control, reserve definition, resource, as well as discovery. And usually the discovery bit's the bit that always falls off the back end, particularly when they get halfway through the year and the gold's not quite there. So for me, the exploration companies are the very best at making discoveries, and we've seen this again more recently. So for my mind, as you do that, the balance is always trying to take it from an exploration company to then get the skill sets in, and that's what we've done at Genesis, where we can complement the exploration team with people that have done development and production before, but also corporately from an M&A perspective, and that's always a danger. And I don't pretend to be an exploration geologist, but I'd also encourage exploration geologists not to pretend to become miners either. At the right juncture, you can complement your team with the right people to do many things, and that's when you can nail it.
Andy, much of the exploration team, senior exploration team at De Grey, came out of that big company environment through Anglo. Did that give you an advantage at De Grey when looking for a Hemi type discovery?
Oh, most definitely. I'd worked with Phil and Allan at Anglo. We were all in the same situation of not being working for Anglo at that stage, and a bit of fortunate circumstances, they all came together. But having that experience to be able to pull apart a terrain, focus in on where we need to work, having experienced people that could pull the data apart. And I'll say pull it apart, it's actually, first of all, put it back together, because it was basically 2 or 3 junior companies pulled apart, put back together, pulled apart, put back together. Data is a mess. Not that it started a mess, but it was all good quality work that had been done previously. We were able to quickly advance things. We'd already pretty much drilled 2.2 million ounces before the Hemi discovery. Nobody gave a damn because we were in the Pilbara. So what it enabled us to do was move quickly on the data and the confidence to know that it was being done well. And then really allowing, Phil and I were probably more busy trying to build the resources up. We gave Allan the time to compile, and that meant hands and feet on the ground, picking up old drill chips with tweezers at times. So boots on the ground, but experienced people to make good observations and then use that data. And there was good data. So that's probably what the benefit was. Having the big company mentality and experience of what takes a mine has been probably the thing that helped us along immensely. We were quick to see that Hemi was something quite unique and large. So we started things very quickly in terms of making sure we're getting good quality data. We could step up the rigs quickly. We built the team quickly around that core group. We already had a good core group prior to that as well. So having that experience of the big company mentality, we knew what had to be done for a big mine to happen and come together. The use of multi-element data has been exceptionally beneficial for us, not just in exploration, but at the mine site level, or what will be a future mine site level. Having that big company mentality is a big plus. Not that I wanted to go back to a big company, but a bit of politics is always in the big companies. We all know that. We're creating a big company. I think it's a very important thing to have experienced people, and a lot of those people come out of big companies.
Chris, I might come back to you and your original point of we're not replacing reserves quickly enough. Is one of the reasons because Australia is such a mature gold exploration destination? Has all the low-hanging fruit been discovered? I ask you in particular because you're no longer really exploring in WA. Your main focus is there in Victoria. What took you to Victoria, and what does that say about the state of prospectivity across Australia?
Sure. Look, I think it's fair to say that since the introduction of carbon in leach extraction technology, there's been a massive boom in gold production in Australia since about 1982. It went up to about 300 tonnes. But it's fair to say that new search space that was opened up by that processing technology has become mature now, and it's becoming more and more difficult to make those significant discoveries, especially the large long life assets like Sunrise Dam, Plutonic, Kanowna Belle, those sorts of gold deposits. I still think that the Archean greenstone is without question the most prolific in terms of gold endowment and endowment for sulfide, nickel, and various other commodities as well. It is a bit more mature, and people have to go undercover and use more advanced techniques and drill a lot more to make the discovery. From Stavely's perspective, at the time that we were looking at, we'd exited Integra Mining, we were looking for a new project. The bang for buck, I suppose, in terms of trying to get a decent position in WA was a little bit more difficult. Whereas we felt that Western Victoria was very much underdone in terms of the porphyry potential. And whilst copper is our main focus, obviously with Cadia and those sorts of deposits and North Parks, gold is a big part of the story as well. And so whilst we might have somewhere in the order of about 0.3 or 0.35 grams in our ore body that's primarily copper, it's still a really decent contributor. And if you can get onto another Cadia system, then they are big long life assets, and really that's what we were looking for, is trying to identify those the bigger systems. And yes, I think the truth is that we thought that we were getting better bang for our buck in Victoria because it was sitting somewhere near between Kazakhstan and wherever else as an exploration destination. I think that sort of turned around quite a bit now, but we were able to be effectively a first mover in Victoria and pick up a big ground position that is something that we felt that a large company would want to see if we were successful. Much more difficult at that time, 2014, to do in WA, and today you can't peg a postage stamp in WA given the amount of tenure pressure.
Thanks, Chris. Kyle, obviously Gold Road went into almost as remote as Victoria, really, from Perth to go onto the Yamana belt. What was that the thinking, is to test a new search space and to test ground that had previously been considered worthless?
Well, it was our former director, Russell Davis, who had driven exploration over that belt with another company beforehand. They were departing from exploration in Australia. He consolidated the tenement package, rolled it into a new company, which eventually became Gold Road. I think Russell saw huge potential in a belt that was just overlooked because of some stigma, some scientific rationale that had gone out the window quite a long time ago, and that just needed to be systematically worked, which was obviously a 5,000 square kilometre underexplored greenstone belt. It was going to take some time, so put together Gold Road and put it to the task. I mean, it was as simple as that. Russell saw opportunity in something that everyone else seemed to think was infertile, too far east, too much hard work. And there's less than 5% outcrop across Yamana. It's mostly under transported sand, but for the most part, it's a stripped weathering profile, and the Archean basement isn't that far under that modern sand cover. So, you know, there's a lot of drilling involved with a lot of applied techniques, a lot of geochemistry, but we continue to find new targets through camp scale targeting and chiseling down from program to program. So there's still a lot of Yamana to test, and I mean, Gruyere proves that it's plenty fertile.
Allan, in the past decade or so, you've been involved in a number of startup companies, gone through Dore and Ribs Gold and now Miramar. You've looked at, obviously, different search spaces in that time. Is what you look for in an area, has that changed over the last decade or so because of new techniques, new technology and so forth?
Not really. I was thinking when I think Chris was saying, how mature Australian exploration is and how it's harder to find things in Australia. And I reckon I've heard that same comment multiple times over the last 30 years. You go back 10, 15 years ago at a conference and people were saying, oh, how mature the exploration is in Australia. And then suddenly you find Tropicana and you find Gruyere and you find Hemi up in the Pilbara. So I find that the comments a bit, is quite sort of amusing. One of the things that Andy was saying is that, you have that great experience of coming from the big company and that technical experience. And a couple of key comments I want to make that, that's really important, that experience. I came from Western Mining, so similar work with some really great exploration guys there. So it's really important to have that experience to be able to recognise similarities of your project with other discoveries. That's the first thing. But it's also important to have an open mind to recognise the differences between what you're looking at and other discoveries. And that's when something like Gruyere sort of falls into that category. Hey, we're out in this belt way out in the middle of nowhere, but it's a greenstone belt. It's still a greenstone belt. It still could hold gold, mineralisation, but it's a bit different. I was talking to Andy before about, what was the turning point with De Grey up in the Pilbara. And I can remember back in Exdiv and Western Mining, the Pilbara was pretty much a no-go zone. That doesn't host much mineralisation, It's still greenstone, but, there's some reason that's not as good as the Yilgarn. And then, these guys go out there and find a great deposit. So concepts and models can be really good, but they can also hamstring your search space as well. So, you go back to the real basics, good geology, structure, source, plumbing system, trap, all those things are common for every deposit. So it's recognising similarities with known deposits and then maybe the difference that makes that thing a bit unique. And that's what I was trying to do all the time, regardless of where I'm working.
Andy, will Hemi be repeated, that moving into a space, an area that has a reputation, as Gruyere is as well? Will that be repeated again in the next decade?
Well, I'd like to think so. Look, I think following on from Alan's comments was when I first went to De Grey, it was very much, why am I going to the Pilbara to look for gold? So just taking your personal bias out of it is the hardest part. Once we got there, it's outcropping mineralisation in the other deposits. For us, it was taking one of those deposits that was different, the recognition of something different, which was Taurana for us, and saying, well, if that's here, it's not quite as big as we'd like, but it added ounces very quickly to 500,000 ounces. What else could be here? And we had all the right ingredients, as Allan was talking about, the plumbing system, deep fractures, hundreds of kilometre long structures. So all the ingredients were there. It was the recognition that something was different in Taurana. So we got all our data out again and re-looked at everything. And that's when we sort of pinpointed the intrusion style mineralisation. So I think if people view terrains as unexplored, maybe not as prospective, they've got to really sit down and go, is that my perception or is that reality? Go and have a look at the data and be a bit more open-minded, take the blinkers off. That's what's going to find the next big discovery in a new area. So I'm wholeheartedly, somebody will find something in a new area. If we're not, we should be going to bed, not getting up in the morning, basically. And we shouldn't be funded if we think we're not going to go and find something. Tomorrow's a new day. Should be smiling because it could be the next hole, but you've got to go and have a try.
Raleigh, it's not just about new areas either. I mean, obviously, you mentioned you were attracted to Genesis because of the work that Michael and the team had done, and particularly the Puzzle North discovery there. You know, this is right in the heart of the gold field. But do you see an opportunity there to take a different approach? I'm thinking that, you know, the depth of drilling in an area like Kukani compared to the rest of the gold fields. Is there still an opportunity in those more mature areas?
Yeah, I think for us, one of the key attractions was so the Ulysses project, which is the sort of half of the resource ounces, has been known about and been drilled out over the last 10 years, and the team's done a fantastic job on that. What particularly got us interested in Genesis as a company is June 20, when they picked up the Kukani tenure. And the main reason for that, and one of the things, again, not looking at it from a technical perspective, but looking at it from an ownership perspective, I think the key opportunities are kind of come back to, if you've got a very focused and very capable exploration team over a bit of ground, it's probably the least respected ground you want to go and pick up, frankly. But if you've got one of these two ingredients, i.e. a very large gold company that's got a bunch of tenure that frankly never gets explored, and they do minimum expenditure on it and very rarely drill a drill hole, that's probably right up there. And I remember Andy Tudor actually came into our office when we were in Saracen one day and picked up the Pinnacles ground off us. And very simply, all he'd done is looked at our presentation in Saracen 5 years ago and looked at it today and said, this ground's dropped off. So he went around to all these companies and started talking to the bigger producers in town and said, well, we'd be interested in selling this. So that's maybe something to think about. But then the other end of the spectrum is the Kukani tenure. If you jump on 10map and have a look there around the Kukani ground, there's probably over a 30 by 30 kilometre box there. You've probably got 10 or 12 different ownership, maybe more, including the prospectors, probably into hundreds. So for us, it was a fantastic bit of work, and it's akin to Michael Fowler, what he did, to what Mark Clark did very successfully at Capricorn, picking up the Mount Gibson ground. The difference is I think Michael didn't get paid immediately for it, which was actually trying to pull together disjointed ownership, and it takes a lot more effort, frankly, when you're trying to pull out of ground out of the Chinese and prospectors and everything in between. So for me, I think that also creates an opportunity, because it's often assumed, as everyone's talked about, that all this ground's been tested, but you actually go back through it and query, and a lot of that ground hasn't had a drill hole put into it properly for over 20 years. So for my mind, that was as attractive. And then literally months after they did that, they went and made a Puzzle North discovery, which is still growing and getting bigger for us. So I think that's another lens to look through as well.
Kyle, Gold Road is in the middle of a M&A transaction, trying to pick up 14.4% of Andy, I believe, in fact. Well, not of Andy, of his company. Is that to do with, you've obviously been looking for a second asset for a long time. Is that to give you an opportunity to test different search spaces and see different opportunities?
Gold Road, yeah, that's exactly it. Gold Road's been looking for new opportunities to grow the business, grow our exploration portfolio, and I resonate the same sentiment as these guys. There's a lot of these terrains, a lot of these areas that for a long time people have said they're mature, they're done, they've been tested to death, there's no gold there, and we just see other opportunities like in the Pilbara, the Patterson, other parts of the Yilgarn, all across Australia, that these terrains really haven't been effectively tested, and using modern techniques, modern thinking, putting together landform models and really thinking on weathering and whether historic exploration has tested these areas properly it really hasn't happened for a lot of them. So,
Allan, do you see anywhere else in Australia? Actually, I might ask this of Chris first, given he's on the other side of Australia. Chris, as well as Victoria, have you looked at other states outside of WA, and do you see an opportunity for the Stavely story to be repeated, perhaps by yourselves or by others elsewhere in the country?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's been some good work done by the various geological surveys and Geoscience Australia looking at areas like the Thomson Belt in Western New South Wales and the mineral systems, in between Tennant Creek into Mount Isa. So there's a lot of non-competitive geoscience data coming out into the market. And there's been some early indications that is leading to new discoveries in new terrains that weren't previously recognized or really weren't on the radar of explorers. So absolutely, I think that there is a lot of potential in Eastern Australia for new discoveries and some big mineral systems. Not to be forgotten that, Broken Hill and Mount Isa really have underscored all of the base metal production of Australia up until the discovery of the Olympic Dam. So there's a lot of potential on this side of the country. Again, the land access and the time delays that the other speakers have highlighted are really big issues. The holding cost of an exploration company, it's often in those areas seasonal exploration, particularly up in Northern Australia, and it may well be, but by the time you get land access, you have to wait another 3 months until it's appropriate for you to get in there weather-wise, or it's too wet, or what have you. So perspective, but access again is a big issue.
Thanks, Chris. Kyle, I'm going to come back to you. We mentioned briefly, Raleigh mentioned as well, the use of technology and new technology. How important is, particularly if we're looking deeper undercover and so forth, how important is technology going to be to the next round of gold discoveries in Australia?
I think it's going to play a really big part. I mean, we continue to use the same exploration techniques and technology we have for a long time, but there's been this continual advancement of analytical methods, different technology, improvements in drilling methodology, soil sampling, big data analysis, big data capture, big data storage. And all of this, when you apply to a mineral system approach and a multidisciplinary targeting, is going to play a really big part in helping companies go into terrains, greenfields or brownfields, unpack all that data that Andy was talking about and really put them in the best spots to go and test for gold.
Well, this is for anybody. Raleigh, you might want to take it first. Will that mean then the makeup of an exploration team look very different in a decade from now? Will there be a lot of different skills that come into a team that we haven't traditionally seen?
Oh, maybe. I'll probably come back to Allan's point. I think Allan mentioned his training at WMC, and I remember I was similar, started at St Ives, and I used to always tease the geos, those coloured pencils everywhere, and there was no such things as CAD back in the day. And I think about the exceptional geologists that came out of that era, that Allan's had the benefit of that training. And so it worries me a little bit as we move forward, talking about people again, just to make sure that who's training the trainer. So for my mind, I think it always starts with very good geology, and I think that's been proven over history that technology will play a part, but it's probably 10% and maybe 90% good geology still.
Andy, how are you seeing that balance now? Are you seeing technology play more of a role?
I'm probably not that positive that it'll be the game changer. I think a bit like the others, I think we're always going to have that core group, core experience, and the geos and the geophysicists, geochemists. There'll be an extra body or two maybe turn up that's good at seismic or whatever the next big thing is. So I don't think it's going to change that much, actually. I think it's going to be a bolt-on. I'm an 80-20 person. You know, I think 80% of it's already there. You'll bolt on the next 20%. And it'll depend what you're looking for. If you're going to go for exploring just under thin sand cover, there might not be too many things unless there's something out of the blue. If you're going deeper, definitely technology and acquiring more quality data from surface somehow. Or through drilling and using vectors better. So I don't see a big change, but yeah, maybe I'm wrong.
Allan, for a junior, is this advance in technology having an immediate impact?
I think the technology maybe allows you to look at more areas sort of more rapidly, larger areas maybe, but pretty superficially. But you still need to get on the ground and put a drill hole into the target. You can't do that from the office, 2,000 k's away. But the GIS and the, regional geophysical data sets and the government data and that helps you focus, helps you look at other areas and scan for things that might be interesting. But you still need to get out on the ground and take a soil sample or a rock chip sample and drill holes. So I don't think that's going to change.
You talk about the speed, and Chris mentioned it earlier about land access and how long it takes. Has the speed, the expectations of the investment community on how quickly you can turn things around, bring results out, define a resource, move into development, has that put more pressure on the exploration process?
Oh, definitely. And I said before, about the number of exploration companies that have listed in the last, 18 months, 2 years is crazy. I think we listed in October 2020, so we were one of the first companies after that sort of real lockdown period in 2020, and there'd been a hiatus of about 6 months or so. But since then, it's been a bit concerning as a geologist that a number of these companies have got no technical expertise to actually do the work, because there's just not enough of us out there to be on the boards of these companies. So that's a real concern from an investor point of view, that put a few projects together, raise some money, and then what happens? So that's what people should be a bit worried about.
Raleigh, would you agree?
Yeah, to give our major sponsor a plug and look at the video that Fraser showed, I think technology on assay turnaround and Chris Lawson photon assay, I think that's a really good example of almost adopting technology initially out of need because of the assay turnaround time. So you drill a hole and you've got a 3 or 4 month delay to get that assay result back. So I think that was cause for exploration geologists, traditional exploration geologists struggling with the technology to then realise you start adopting it and doing your duplicates and then realising it's actually proven technology that's going to potentially revolutionise at least at the back end of that process. I think that's a really good example. And Andy mentioned the 3D seismic, and it triggered my memory that I'm actually a high size shareholder. So I've changed my answer to about 90% technology, I think. But it forms a part. But even looking at a 3D seismic, you get a migraine looking at these things. So it's about, I think Andy mentioned the word vectoring. So it gives you a vector, but at the end of the day, you still need to drill the hole and still need good geology. So it is absolutely a balance. And coming back to the market piece, and Allan's right. The only caution I've got, and Kyle mentioned at the start, is it can steer you towards targeting results as opposed to targeting good geology, because it's not always the same thing. So it's always a balance, I suppose, for any exploration company to make sure first and foremost it's good geology. And if you keep doing that and having the discipline, Andy talked about the Hemi discovery. It is a leap of faith, because you can have technical successes, and geos love those ones, and the market doesn't like those so much. So it is about trying to find the balance. But at the end of the day, you do need these results to obviously keep the money coming in to be able to keep drilling.
Kyle, I know at Gold Road you've got a big group of younger geologists and exploration professionals there. Is there, Allan mentioned and Raleigh mentioned, the idea of who's training the trainers and coming from that good background. How are you providing, as a company, how are you providing that good basis and sound professionalism to your young geos? Is it a challenge?
I think it's just getting together, geos getting together and chatting geology. Finish a body of work, you review results, compile your geology, update your maps, and then you get together and talk about it. And that's, we're fortunate at Gold Road, while we're a core exploration group and Goldfields kindly look after Gruyere for us. We've got an in-house principal resource geologist, mining engineer, enviro team, a project generation group. Got a really great in-house technical team. So when the exploration team come into the office, they can sit down with any one of the specialists or anyone else in the business and say, this is my idea, this is what we're seeing, and talk it out and grow from there. There's workshops and training, but then there's a real core on-the-job learning as you work projects up from greenfields to hopefully brownfields.
Well, it sounds like most people are beginning to digest their lunch, so I've had enough of asking questions, so it's time for somebody else. Sorry, Mel, you hadn't quite finished it while you get your microphone. My colleagues, Mel and Vidya, will be wanting around with the microphones. Have we got any questions from the audience? Maybe people haven't finished digesting their lunch. Oh, we've got one, have we? Oh, it's my colleague.
Yeah, we've got some questions from the Twitter sphere. The first one's from Craig Hook. I think he's here, so he must be still digesting his lunch. Is there too much focus on acquisitions and not enough on greenfields?
I want to take that first.
Greenfields is where you make, I guess, the most value for shareholders. You can turn a $2 million company into a $200 million company. I think, everyone's probably seen that value chart in the history of an exploration company. You make the discovery, you go through the development phase, and then if you're lucky enough to get into production, you get incremental value add. But I think, really the discoveries is where you create the value. I don't know if anyone disagrees with that.
I certainly don't disagree with that. Acquisition, probably, I think it's a bit of how mature the company is and where they're at. Obviously, if you're in production and you want to grow the production quickly, exploration takes time. So it has its role to play, acquisition. But as Allan said, greenfields can add a lot of value if you get it right. So getting back to a couple of the comments earlier about the market driving things and technology, I think the internet's one of the best things and worst things ever invented. In terms of getting information out to shareholders and investors, it takes us months to do all this work, and then it's out on a split second and it's distributed across the world within seconds, and they expect the next one tomorrow. And it's just a function of how dissemination of information has gone in the last 10, 20 years. So the expectation by investors that the exploration companies and even the mining companies can produce it tomorrow, something new and exciting, and we can drill holes continually, that's the biggest pressure we find on companies. So, and the other one was, I feel sorry for some of the junior geos working at Hemi, because all they know is drill a hole, find gold. And when some of them haven't missed yet. And you go, there's going to be a stage in their career where they go off and do new things, and hopefully they find new ore bodies, but they're going to be sorely disappointed at some stage. And and that's what comes with experience. They'll know to recognise good rocks, and hopefully they'll take it on. But that'll be the challenge for a couple of the junior geos throughout the whole industry, I think. And so I'm with greenfields over acquisitions, but that's me.
Raleigh, maybe you can offer a counterpoint given the role you played in the creation of WA's largest gold miner that essentially happened through acquisitions, but also the discovery of additional reserves and resources on mature assets.
Yeah, I think we must have been hiring all the dud geos from the sounds of it. But I fondly remember actually sitting around a board table often having this conversation at the Saracen board table. So Dr. Warwick Smith, who's known to many, would always argue that exploration is the single greatest value creator for a shareholder. And opposite here, Morgan Ball, sitting over here, would, as a CFO, would also argue it's just a big black hole you're pouring 50s down. So there's always going to be this push and pull, and obviously making a Hemi discovery at $1 an ounce or whatever the number is always going to be fantastically accretive when resources are trading at $220 an ounce. So it's a no-brainer once you've found it, but obviously, how much confidence do you have and how much confidence do shareholders have up to that point. The counter-argument on M&A, I think what's been a trend in recent years, which I think is excellent for thinking about shareholders on both sides, is this notion around 30% premiums. I think is just absolutely ridiculous. Unless there's genuine synergies involved, I just don't see how it's viable, how it's even possible to get that much of a disconnect. So M&A, particularly MOEs, I think should be far more common, where it's actually a win-win for both shareholders more often than not. Even the company that thinks it's getting a premium, if it's not real, ultimately, particularly if it's all in script, those shareholders become holders of the bigger entity paying a premium, and their value comes down. So I don't get the logic of it, albeit I do get the logic of an MOE, particularly if there's genuine operational synergy. So depends. I think you just got to look at everything. And allocation of capital, what it all boils down to, whether it's going into growing reserves, making new discoveries, growing your resource base, or M&A, or giving it back to shareholders, which is something that's also should be looked at as the ultimate goal. It's finding that balance, and if you get that out of whack, your shareholders are the ones that suffer pretty quickly.
Thanks, Riley. Chris, you mentioned earlier your role in a merger of Integra with Silver Lake. Was that a consideration at the time of how best you take those assets forward?
Yeah, absolutely. The whole issue of synergy was very clear there. We had a brand new processing plant right next door to their high-grade underground mine. We had open pits. We had a 2 million tonne stockpile that we'd already paid mining for. And putting those two operations together made every bit of sense from an operational perspective. Our assets are still going. It's 10 years later. So yes, there was definitely the synergy there. And I think with respect to M&A, I think those sorts of combinations make a lot of sense. And I think what stops a lot of combinations is where personalities get involved, where people get concerned personally about their job or their non-executive director fees, and they stand in the way of something that actually makes sense. We have seen that ourselves corporately in that particular instance. The Integra board was happy to step aside in favor of the Silver Lake guys, and they've done a great job of those assets since we stepped aside.
Speaking of M&A, obviously, really the emergence of Saracen and particularly I'm thinking Northern Star and Evolution and even Goldfields to an extent was prefaced by the fact that the North Americans had decided to leave Australia as a gold destination. The turnaround in fortune since then and the rate of discovery since then, can we expect to see those same majors return and look at Australia again?
Not for now, but I'll be very confident they come back, which is probably the perfect answer for small exploration companies, is that the opportunity is that they'll circle back at the right juncture. At the moment, particularly right now in Australia, if you look at the recent suite of quarterlies, it's tough going being a producer in Australia at the moment. So, I think that needs to wash through. Obviously, COVID environment will normalise in the months, quarters, years ahead. But I think in time they'll circle back. But we've also got to recognise that there's actually a new brand of major in Western Australia. And if you mentioned Goldfields, you mentioned Northern Star. They are now the largest gold producers in Western Australia. So I think there also becomes opportunities for the next Saracens and Northern Stars that were combined market cap of $50 million back in 2010. To be smart about the timing of an Integra at Silver Lake's another very good example. There were some of the larger mid-tier producers back in the day to be smart around the balance between exploration and also maybe picking off some of these assets that may become non-core to that next tier, if you like, who are now the largest gold producers in Western Australia.
Andy, it's a very leading question. And have you seen any interest in your project from the North American majors and shown an interest in coming back to WA?
Not really from the majors, but certainly North American investors. So, and from England, all over the world. So I wouldn't say it's just North America. Yeah, look, it's not like we have people knocking on our door every day, put it that way, but no doubt they're all looking, running numbers. They better hurry because we're going to build it pretty quick.
Kyle, obviously Gold Road did choose to go down a joint venture path at the time. Do you think that's benefited ultimately your work on your own greenfields exploration that has allowed you to carry on that, spending now those big dollars on greenfields exploration because you've got a partner there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when Gold Road was going through a feasibility process for Gruyere, the company was very transparent that they were running a dual process so that they would run our own internal feasibility study for Gold Road to build the project ourselves, and also look around if anyone would be interested in joint venture opportunity. I think the immediate upside win, and what I saw as a huge positive of the deal, was that we were able to become self-funded through the transaction and continue exploring Yamana. Because of where Gold Road was in the market, even though we had this huge discovery and project well underway and top quality feasibilities underway, that the building of the operation, I mean, the cost of the feasibilities alone and then commencement of construction and commissioning of a mine would have really put a big dent in our exploration budget. And when you've got a big land package and a lot of targets, a lot of excitement to go and test those targets, it would have been emotionally and technically a hard thing to walk away from. So, and Goldfields have been awesome. It's a great partnership, and yeah, it's facilitated us to do just that, to just keep.
Passcode in. Dom is yep. So this question is what's most important when making a decision to mine, the number of ounces or the grade of those ounces? And that's from Mother of God 8.
Andy, let's start with you. You're the closest to a decision to mine at this very moment, I believe.
I don't think any of those matters. In the end, it's what's the greatest return to shareholders?
Yeah, that's it. Profit per ounce, surely.
Kyle, you agree?
Yeah, I agree.
Riley?
Oh, I just told you how terrible producing gold is at the moment, so neither of those answers. Look, definitely, you got to be, grade's king, but I think if I go back in time, I think one of the greatest stewards of capital in gold history, Nick Giorgetto, if you go back to, they've almost been at the frontier of every turn of what's viable. And, what they did in Equigold back in the day, mining 1 gram back in the 80s or 90s, whatever it was unheard of. And we went underground at Karari on sub 3 grams. We're running 2 grams at Thunderbox. So it's not just about, grade's king was always the driver, but it's actually about, economies of scale and something like what the guys have got up at Hemi will prove that. It's low strip ratio, lots of gold there. So there's a whole bunch of factors that come into play.
Does that apply to Stavely in Victoria, Chris, that it's not necessarily grade?
Yeah, well, we're at the very early stage of studies. We're just on the cusp of releasing our initial mineral resource estimate. The deposit, as we know it, isn't exactly what we were looking for initially. We were looking for bulk tonnage, low-grade porphyry-style mineralisation. We ended up with this high-grade, structurally controlled lode style. So having high grade, I'll say that high grade is the winner. But look, I think the truth is that we're exploring regionally to see whether there's something else out there that might be larger, more bulk tonnage, lower grade, where it would make sense to put our infrastructure there, because Cayley's of a grade that it'll likely truck anywhere within our 10-year position. So we need to know that at an early stage. But having a little bit of grade and that little bit of sweetness is always a bit of comfort. And if you can find a little bit of tonnage to go with it, albeit a lower grade, then that really makes a perfect mix, and that's what we're actually looking to find at this very moment.
Thanks, Chris, and thank you. Who was it, Michael? Mother of God, 8. The 8th in the line of Mothers of God. Have we got any other questions? Well, surely there must be a question from the floor.
Just in terms of renewable energy solutions, are we looking at any?
Oh, over here, sorry.
Just in terms of renewable energy solutions, because gold mining has been around for a while, and just want to know if there's any considerations for that at this point.
Does renewable energy change the way we approach development of gold projects?
Yeah, I think Goldfields has got a good plug today, and I think particularly the Agnew operations, what they've been able to do there from a renewables perspective, but more importantly on a brownfields asset, which I think is often hard to do. The simple reason being is the investment of capital, whether it be from the balance sheet of the operator or someone coming in to put that on their balance sheet. The one issue you get with gold mines, except for a couple here, is they're often quite short life, and it's very difficult to put that amount of capital in at the front end. So I think for new assets, and no doubt De Grey's looking at this, is looking at renewables over a suite, but also I think Bellevue has been in the press recently about being right on the front foot with renewables. So it's not just the lithium and nickel and these guys that have been looking at it. It's absolutely in the sphere of the gold miners as well. And I think that technology, I think Sandfire is probably the first one that comes to mind at De Grey to install a solar farm. And I remember at the time everyone scratching their head going, "What are you wasting money doing that for?" And now you see them on more mines. Yeah, it's pretty. There you go. And now you see them, frankly, on more mines than you don't, which is actually really pleasing. And it's very cost effective, and your cost per power, particularly if you're up against diesel, is actually far cheaper. So not only is it environmentally friendly, it's actually cheaper as well.
I think one of the challenges, not just with the renewables, but a lot of sort of big capital expenditure with gold mines, is they tend to be a lot shorter mine life than a big nickel mine or an iron ore mine. So it's hard to justify spending a lot of money on that sort of capex up front when the deposit sort of reveals itself over time. And I remember having those sort of discussions with the mines minister when we're going through the whole gold royalty thing, saying, gold mines are different to other mines, especially if they're underground. You sort of don't know what you've got till you've been there for a while. So it's always difficult to make that investment decision up front.
How does, thanks for a great question, and it made me think of another aspect of that. How does the push towards decarbonisation and net zero, how is that going to affect the gold exploration industry? Is there moves afoot to lower the carbon footprint of gold exploration? We've got all of our panelists looking up into the sky.
Don't know if I understand the question properly, but I think it's going to be applying more to mining than exploration because of the capital involved. But I can see things like diesel being phased out to electric drill rigs more, electric vehicles, even though I'm not a big believer in getting rid of the combustion engine, because I like older cars, as Dom would know. So you've got to have a V8 there somewhere. But I can see it changing the exploration slowly. There'll be portable solar for camps and things like that. We're certainly looking at renewables as part of the Hemi development. We're fortunate in the Pilbara region where we're close to some major infrastructure, including power. The question for probably us will be, is it immediately renewables on site? Or is it part of the whole network in the Pilbara? Some very big programs being looked at in the Pilbara from third parties to link into the power supply throughout the region. So, that could be a huge capital saving for us, where we still get the benefit of renewables, but we're not actually putting in all the cash. But then there's the opportunity we're looking at is building, renewables right on site and feeding in. The biggest understanding, I'm a geo, not an engineer, so my biggest understanding with the renewables energy is that power surge at the beginning when you're trying to start things up and all of those sorts of things. So I don't understand any of that at all, but that does constrain things a little bit. But on the exploration, I can see it slowly happening, but not to such a degree.
Thanks, Andy. Did anyone else want to tackle that one? No, is the answer. Right, we've got time for one more question. Oh, we've got one just up the front. Angelique's got you there.
Hey guys, studies show that we as humans function better when we have one thing to focus on. So to sum up today, as exploration geologists, and you guys are quite successful in what you've done, what is the one thing that we should be focusing on to unlock potential in the future? Give us one.
We might start with Chris on that one, given we started the day with you, Chris.
All right. Look, aside from my previous mention of land access, I think personally that the biggest contribution, and I'll agree with some of the earlier speakers, the exploration is this team. It's the team really, and it's the people that you've got assembled to do it. I'm a big believer in collaboration, and so our team is constantly exposed to people like Scott Halley and Greg Corbett, and so we bring people in, and after we've done a body of work and we hash it out, we thrash it out. And I like to see a diversity of opinions. I don't want all of my people thinking exactly the same way. I'd much rather see them throwing ideas around, and no idea is a crazy idea until we've had a discussion around it, right? So I think it's that the contestability of ideas is really the important thing around exploration, because I think you have to think something that is worth going after and then go and test it. It's the whole scientific theory. So that's my thinking, is just diversity of opinions, bring it in, put them all in a bucket and see what comes out.
Thanks, Chris. Andy, we'll start with you and we'll work our way back up.
Assuming you've got the project and the people, for me, the De Grey story is more about persistence and making sure all of your holes are effective, because Hemi wasn't found in one hole. It was 20 years of experience. De Grey's held that ground. 2 holes failed to reach base bedrock over Eagle, which could have changed the whole story back in 2007. So I would say persistence and making sure you're getting quality drill holes. I'll quote Phil. He talked to me before I came in and said, just drill holes where nobody else has drilled. And then he corrected himself and said effective holes. So effective holes and persistence, making sure you understand what you're looking for.
Thanks, Andy. I'm Phil. Allan?
Yeah, I'd say something similar about being systematic and thorough. So if you come up with an idea of why you like an area, make sure you test it. Be systematic, look at the data, don't try and not leave things, untested. And then I'll also say, know what you don't know. So ask questions. Don't assume that you know everything about the project. So be thorough in what you do, but also be willing to ask questions of people, of companies, and of the data, which is what you were talking about before.
Kyle?
Yeah, expanding on Andy and Allan, persistence and great team and great project, but just core geology, just pushing it as far as you can go. Taking models in, being prepared to reject them, to reject your own inter, sometimes multiple times, collaborating with your group, as Chris said, and working in a great team with great people always makes that process somewhat easier, or at least more fun. Geology should always be fun. Yeah, taking that geology as far as you can go.
This feels like one of them games where the first person says one thing and the second person says 2 things, and now really you have to remember what the other 4 people who are all geologists said.
Something about fun. Servo, yeah. High servos to find gold. I would say bit of courage along the way, which is a bit of what Andy was saying, because it is a bit of persistence, a bit of courage is important. Anything to do with market facing, you just got to be very careful about what you're what you put out to the market, whether it be expectations, because at the end of the day, it's about how you manage those expectations and making sure the shareholders are with you along the journey. So just don't sort of over-promise and under-deliver is always a surefire way to get your share price down. But to wrap up, I think every single panellist has mentioned people, and Kyle mentioned having fun. So it's a massive skill shortage. This is the fundamentally biggest issue facing not just the resources sector, not just exploration, but any business in Western Australia right now. Everyone talks around pushing prices up. For us, proudly, we've got people joining our business at a fifth of what they were earning last year. And that's fundamentally around getting a team that's incentivised to do well, and shareholders win, we win, but also having a group of people that have fun together, because at the end of the day, you have to come out. Often you're going out into the Pilbara and it can get pretty hot up there. Lots of flies, all those sorts of things. So you want to have a core group of people that you're having fun with, and people attract people. And again, I'll give Gold Road a bit of a plug here. Justin Osborne, attracts a Scotty Donaldson, who attracts all these guns for hire, frankly, out of the WMC era into St Ives, and surprise, surprise, a very successful business, right? So start with people, surround yourself with good people, make sure you're having fun, and there's different ways to attract people to your business. It's about giving them opportunities, having some success, having some fun. It's not always about having to pay more to get talent. So the Genesis guys might agree with me then. The sales pitch was the money's not very good, but the hours are long. Is that essentially what it was? Thank you very much, gentlemen. I'm not going to try and remember all 5 points that makes the key points, but hopefully that gave you at least one answer to contemplate. Thank you very much for joining us, gentlemen. And I am afraid to say, actually, that it is all gentlemen this time around. We did strive to bring in some diversity among the lineup. We didn't achieve it this time, but we certainly will.
We've got a surveyor.
Yeah, we've got a surveyor, yeah. Demographically, that is very different. But please rest assured, we continue to strive for diversity in our panel lineups, and we'll do much better for it again next time around. But despite not having any diversity, I think our panelists today have given us a fantastic hour of anecdotes and suggestions and insight into what it takes to be a successful gold exploration company in 2020s. So I think I can ask you join me in thanking our panelists. This panel discussion was live streamed across the globe, as we can see from the tweets that we got, one which was from within the room. But I'm sure there was lots of other people as well who are watching it. The full video will be available on the Paydirt TV YouTube channel in the coming days, as will all of our previous videos are also available, and there'll be coverage in the June edition of Paydirt. Please, it's not the end of proceedings. The drinks will still be flowing. Please stick around and enjoy wearing that mask in public for one more time before we reveal ourselves next month. Next month's panel will be on nickel. So we're switching focus, but please again join us. We'll keep these going now that we are unlocked. But we really enjoy these events, and hopefully you get a lot out of them as well. So thank you to our sponsors, Intertech, and thank you for everybody else who continues to support these lunches. And we look forward to seeing you again next month. Thank you.